The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy. Daniel sat alone in his small house at the edge of the town. The wind outside moved the trees, making soft, scratching sounds against the window. He was about to turn off the lights and go to bed when he heard something strange. It was a knock, soft and weak, almost like it did not have the strength to continue. Daniel froze. He never got visitors this late, and his house was far from the main road. Who could it be at this hour, and why did it sound so desperate? He stood up slowly, his heartbeat quick. The knock came again, this time weaker, as if the person outside was about to collapse. Daniel thought maybe it was a traveler lost on the road or someone in need, but there was also fear inside him, because strange things had been happening in town lately. People spoke of lights in the sky and shadows moving in the fields. He tried to ignore those stories, but the thought came rushing back now. Daniel walked to the door and held the handle. For a moment, he hesitated, thinking it might be better not to open it, but then another sound came. Not a knock, but a low cry, a sound full of pain. His chest tightened, and before he could stop himself, he pulled the door open. There, on the porch, lay a figure. It was not like anything he had ever seen before. A woman, but not human. Her skin was pale silver, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Her hair was long and tangled. Falling across her face, her eyes, large and dark, looked up at him with hunger and fear. She tried to speak, but only a broken whisper came out. Daniel froze, his breath caught. An alien, right here at his doorstep. He remembered the government warnings. The news saying if anyone ever saw one, they must report immediately. Aliens were dangerous. They said not to be trusted, but this woman, lying on his porch, looked more like a dying soul than a monster. She reached out a thin hand, shaking. Her fingers barely touched the wood of the porch. Daniel felt his fear fight with his pity. His mind told him to close the door, to call the authorities. But his heart told him she would not survive the night if he did nothing. Slowly, he stepped forward. He knelt beside her and whispered, "Can you hear me?" She blinked. Her lips moved, but the words were broken. Her body trembled as if she had not eaten in days. Daniel looked at her face again, and in her eyes. He saw something he could not ignore, the same look he had seen once in a stray dog that came to his door during winter. Desperate and begging for life, without thinking any more, he put his arms around her. She was lighter than he expected, almost weightless. He could feel every bone under her skin. She let out a weak sigh, as if his touch gave her comfort. Daniel carried her inside, shutting the door quickly behind him. The warmth of the house wrapped around them. Daniel laid her gently on the couch. Her chest rose and fell shallowly. He hurried to the kitchen and brought water. Guiding it carefully to her lips, she drank in small sips, each one looking like it took all the strength she had. Then she whispered a sound that almost sounded like "thank you." Daniel sat beside her, unsure of what to do next. He had broken the rule. He had taken an alien into his home. If anyone found out, his life could be destroyed. But as he watched her rest, her face softening just a little, he knew he could not throw her back into the cold. Minutes turned into hours. Daniel stayed awake. Listening to her faint breathing, he wondered who she was, where she came from, and why she had ended up on his doorstep. He thought of the stories about war in the stars, of strange ships seen above the earth. Maybe she was a survivor. Maybe a refugee. Whatever the truth, she was now in his home, and he had to make a choice. Would he protect her or betray her? The question echoed in his mind as the night grew deeper. Outside, the wind blew stronger, and the shadows seemed to move closer to the house. Daniel sat there in silence, watching over the alien woman who had fallen at his door. Not knowing that his life had just changed forever, morning light entered through the curtains. Daniel opened his eyes slowly. He had not slept much. His body ached from sitting all night on the chair beside the couch. Guarding the alien woman, every small sound in the house had kept him alert. Afraid someone might discover her, the woman was still there, lying weakly on the couch. Her breathing was shallow, but her color looked a little better than last night. She had survived the night. Daniel felt both relief and fear at the same time. He stood and went quietly to the kitchen. He made warm soup, simple and light. When he brought it back, the smell seemed to wake her. Her large eyes opened slowly, blinking at the strange human room around her. She sat up with effort, her thin hands trembling. Daniel held the bowl out carefully. She looked at it with suspicion at first. Then, with hunger, he gave her a spoon. But she did not know how to use it. Instead, she leaned forward and drank straight from the bowl. The soup spilled a little down her chin, but she did not stop. Her body seemed starved for every drop. Daniel watched in silence. His heart twisted. She was no monster. She was someone who had suffered beyond words. When the bowl was empty, she whispered a sound. It was not English, but the tone was clear. Gratitude. He spoke softly. You are safe here. She looked at him, her head tilting slightly as if trying to understand. Then, in broken words, she managed, safe. Here, her voice was weak, but her effort touched him. Daniel tried again. Name. He pointed at himself. Daniel. Then he pointed at her. She seemed to understand. After a long pause, she whispered, Leora. The name sounded soft. Like a song, Daniel repeated it slowly. Leora. She gave a small nod. Time passed, and little by little, Leora began to show signs of trust. She touched the blanket around her shoulders as if she had never felt such warmth before. She looked at the pictures on the wall, at the books on the shelf. Her eyes carried wonder, but also sadness. Daniel wanted to know her story, but he was afraid of pushing too hard. Instead, he asked gently. Hurt, he pointed at her arms and legs. She lifted her sleeve, showing scars, thin lines across her skin. They looked like burns, some fresh, some old. Her eyes darkened, and she shook her head. He did not ask more, not yet. The truth would come when she was ready. For now, she needed food, rest, and safety. But Daniel's mind could not rest. He knew what the world outside his door would say if the authorities discovered Leora in his home. They would take her away. They would not see her as a weak soul, but as a threat. And they would punish him for helping her. He moved to the window and peeked outside. The street was empty, but he felt uneasy, as if eyes could be watching from far away. He closed the curtain quickly. His house was now a secret, one that could destroy him. Leora's voice broke the silence. Family, she said. Daniel turned, confused. She placed her hand on her chest, then pointed at him. Family, she said again. The word was broken, but clear. Daniel's heart tightened. She had no one left, and in her weakness, she was reaching out to him. He wanted to answer, but he hesitated. Could he really become family to an alien? Could he risk everything for her? Instead, he only nodded slowly. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. A fragile light after so much darkness. Later that day, Daniel gave her more food and some clean clothes he had kept in storage, though too big for her. She wrapped them around herself. She moved slowly through the house, touching objects with wonder. She stopped at the window, staring at the sky. Daniel noticed her eyes fill with tears. Home. She whispered. The word carried deep sorrow. She was far from her world, far from her people, and now trapped in a place where she was hunted. Daniel wanted to comfort her, but he could only stand beside her in silence. As the sun began to set, Daniel realized something important. Leora was no longer just a stranger in his house. She was becoming a part of it. Her presence had changed the air, the silence, the rhythm of his life, and though fear remained, a strange warmth was beginning to grow between them, but danger was never far. That night, as he locked the door, Daniel noticed fresh tracks in the dirt outside. Footprints that were not his. His stomach tightened. Someone had been near his home, watching inside. Leora slept peacefully for the first time. Daniel sat by the window with his heart racing. He knew the choice he had made was not safe. By saving her, he had entered a storm much larger than himself. A storm that was now moving closer with every passing moment. The third morning came with gray skies. Clouds covered the sun, and the air felt heavy. Daniel sat at the table, staring at the steam rising from his coffee. Across the room, Leora sat quietly on the couch. Wrapped in a blanket, her eyes followed the window as if she expected someone to break through it. She ate slowly now, not like the desperate hunger of the first night. Her strength was returning, but her silence was deep. Daniel wanted to understand her story, but every time he asked a question, her face closed like a locked door. Still, small pieces began to appear. Sometimes she muttered words in her own language, and sometimes she tried broken English. One morning when Daniel asked gently, "Family," she whispered, "Gone." Her voice cracked on the word, and Daniel understood. She had lost them all. Later that day, when rain began to fall, Leo spoke more. She sat near the fire, her hands stretched toward the warmth. Her voice was low, but each word carried pain. "War," she said. Her dark eyes lifted to meet his. "My people." Burned, she touched the scar on her arm. Daniel's chest tightened as he realized those marks were not accidents. They were wounds from violence. Daniel leaned forward. "Who hurt you?" he asked softly. Leora looked down, her hands clenched into fists. "Hunters," she said. "They take us. Sell us." The words were broken, but clear enough. Daniel felt his blood run cold. She was not just a refugee. She was a survivor of slavery. She continued in pieces. Her planet had fallen to raiders. Many were captured. Those who resisted were killed. Leora had escaped, but not far enough. She was taken, starved, beaten, and finally left behind like she was worthless. Her voice trembled as she explained, "I ran. No one. Only me." Daniel could see the pain was more than physical. Her heart was broken, the memory of her people gone forever. He felt anger stir inside him, not at her, but at the cruelty she had faced. She was sitting in his home, weak and scarred, because others had decided her life had no value. "Not anymore," he whispered. His voice carried a promise he had not planned to make. Leora looked at him, her lips parting slightly, as if the words touched something inside her. But even as trust grew, fear never left. That night, when the rain turned into thunder, Leora flinched at every sound. She curled against the couch, her eyes wide. Daniel sat near her, telling her softly, "Safe. You are safe." He repeated the words until her breathing calmed. The days passed slowly, and Daniel noticed how she began to change. She watched him carefully when he cooked. When he fixed things in the house, she learned quickly, trying to copy one morning. She even managed to boil water for tea. She placed the cup in front of him with a shy smile. "For family," she said. The word struck him deep. Yet Daniel's fear for her safety grew stronger. The footprints outside his house still haunted him. He checked the windows often, listening for strange sounds, if hunters or authorities were looking. It was only a matter of time. One evening, as they sat together, Leora spoke suddenly. "You risk," she said. Daniel looked at her in surprise. She pointed at herself, then at him. "Me danger. You die." Her voice shook, but her meaning was clear. She was warning him that helping her could cost him his life. Daniel leaned back, his mind heavy. He knew she was right. But he also knew what he had seen in her eyes: loneliness, pain, and the desperate need for kindness. He could not throw her back into the world. Not after all she had suffered. "No," he said firmly. "I will not let them take you." His words were simple, but his tone was final. Leora's eyes softened. A single tear slid down her cheek. She whispered, "Family," again, but this time it sounded stronger. That night, Daniel dreamed of fire, of shadows chasing them through endless fields. He woke with sweat on his skin. His heart raced as if warning him. Outside, a dog barked in the distance. Then silence. The world felt too quiet. To tense, the next morning, Daniel made a decision. He would prepare. If danger came, he would not face it empty-handed. He checked the old tools in his shed, gathered supplies, and hid some food. Leora watched him with curious eyes, but did not ask. Perhaps she understood more than she could. Inside the house, the bond between them grew. Leora no longer looked like a stranger. She moved with care. She smiled sometimes. She even laughed once when Daniel slipped while carrying a box. The sound was light, fragile but beautiful. It was the first true sign of life he had seen in her. But beneath the warmth, a shadow lingered. Her stories of pain were not finished. Her enemies were still out there, and Daniel could feel it. He knew that by protecting her, he had stepped into a world of danger he did not yet understand. As the evening came, Leora sat by the fire again. Her eyes distant. "They come," she said softly. Daniel froze. "Who?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "Hunters. Always come." Her voice was flat, not a warning, but a truth she had carried all her life. Daniel looked at her, then at the door. He realized something deep. This was no longer just her fight. It was his as well. And he knew when the hunters came, he would be ready. The days after the storm were quiet, maybe too quiet. Daniel tried to convince himself it was normal, but deep inside he knew something was wrong. He noticed small things, the way the air outside felt heavier, the strange silence of the neighborhood, even the dog across the street that barked. Every night was suddenly quiet. One afternoon, while chopping wood behind the house, Daniel saw dust rising on the far road. A black vehicle rolled slowly past, not a common truck or car. Its windows were dark, its movement slow, like it was searching. Daniel froze. Gripping the axe tighter, he did not recognize the vehicle, but everything about it felt wrong. He stepped back inside quickly. Leora was sitting at the table, trying to write English words on a scrap of paper. Her eyes lifted when she saw his face. She tilted her head, sensing his fear. "What?" she asked softly. Daniel whispered, "Car." "Not from here." She stood and moved to the window, peeking through the curtain when she saw it. Her whole body stiffened. "Hunters," she breathed. Her voice cracked with fear. Daniel's stomach dropped. The word he had dreaded was now real. The vehicle stopped at the corner. Two men stepped out, dressed in plain clothes, but their movements were sharp, trained. One held a small device, scanning the ground. The other looked around with cold eyes. They were searching. Daniel pulled Leora back from the window. "Stay low," he whispered. His heart raced so hard he thought they might hear it. For almost an hour, the men walked slowly around the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking questions. Daniel heard faint voices outside. His chest tightened with each sound. If they came here, what would he say? How could he explain the alien woman hiding inside his house? Finally, the vehicle moved on, leaving dust in the air. Daniel let out a long breath. His hands shook as he sat down. Leora still stood near the window, her face pale. She whispered, "They smell us." "Always." Daniel looked at her, confused. "Smell," he repeated. She nodded slowly. "Track." "My kind." Her eyes were full of hopeless knowledge. Daniel felt the weight of her words. They would not stop. They would return, stronger. He realized the danger was no longer far away. It was here, circling his home. That night, he double-locked every door. He set a chair under the back handle. He barely slept, listening to every sound outside. The wind-moving branches made him jump. Every creak in the house felt like footsteps. In the morning, Daniel decided he had to prepare. He took Leora to the cellar, showing her the hiding place he had built when storms were bad. It was small, hidden behind shelves. "If they come, you stay here," he said firmly. She looked at the dark space, fear in her eyes, but she nodded. But hiding would not be enough. Daniel knew. He began to gather tools, an old hunting rifle, knives, anything that could help. He checked the locks, the windows, the shed. His house was no longer just a home. It had to become a shield. Leora watched him, sometimes helping quietly. Sometimes she looked at him with guilt, danger. "Me," she said one night, pointing to herself. "No, me. You safe." Her voice carried deep sorrow, as if she believed leaving would save him. Daniel shook his head. "You're not leaving," he said firmly. His voice surprised even himself. But it was true. He could not abandon her. Not after everything she had suffered. He would rather face the hunters than betray her. The following evening, while the sun dipped low, Daniel heard voices outside again. He froze, pressing his ear to the wall. Two men stood near the road, their words carried on the wind. "Reports say someone saw movement here." One said, the other replied, "We'll search again tomorrow." Daniel's blood went cold. They were coming back, and this time they would not just knock politely, they would break doors. They would search, they would find her, unless he was ready. That night, the house felt like a cage. Daniel and Leora sat in silence by the fire. The shadows from the flames flickered across her face. She whispered suddenly, "You?" Afraid, Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes," he admitted. There was no reason to lie. Her eyes softened, and she reached out a thin hand, placing it gently on his. Her skin was cool, almost fragile, but the touch carried strength. "Family," she said quietly. Daniel swallowed hard. The word gave him courage, even as fear burned in his chest when he looked into her eyes. He realized something important. He was no longer protecting her just out of pity. She had become part of his life, part of his home, his family. Outside, the night was too still. The hunters were near. And Daniel knew the first true test was coming. The safety of his quiet life was gone, replaced by danger, but deep inside, a fire had been lit. He would fight. He would not let them take her. The knock that had once brought Leora into his life had started everything. Now another knock was coming. Not weak, not desperate, but strong and merciless. And Daniel knew, when it came, he would be ready. Morning lights spilled across the small kitchen. Daniel stood at the stove, frying eggs while the old radio played softly. The house felt different now, no longer silent and empty. He could hear the soft steps of Leora moving in the other room. She had begun to walk with more strength, the weakness of her first days slowly fading. When she entered the kitchen, wrapped in one of Daniel's shirts that hung loose on her frame, he felt the strangeness of it all a few weeks ago. His life had been quiet, lonely. Now, an alien woman sat at his table, her eyes bright with curiosity, her hands folded as she waited for breakfast. She smiled when he placed the plate in front of her. The first time he cooked for her, she had eaten like a starving creature. Now, she ate slower. Watching how Daniel used a fork and trying to copy him, it was clumsy, but each attempt made her laugh softly. The sound filled the room with warmth. After the meal, she insisted on helping. At first, Daniel tried to stop her, but she shook her head firmly. She wanted to clean the dishes, to sweep the floor, to do small things around the house. Her hands were unsure, but her effort was real. "You don't have to," Daniel told her. She looked at him, tilted her head, and said in her broken English, "Family." Share. The word hit him again, deeper this time. She was not just surviving anymore, she was building a life with him, day by day. Small changes began to shape their lives. Leora started tending the garden, kneeling in the dirt, her pale silver hands carefully touching the soil. Daniel watched as she hummed softly to herself, almost like the plants were listening. Strangely, the garden seemed to respond, growing faster, stronger. He didn't ask how, but he noticed in the evenings. They sat by the fire. Leora asked him to teach her words. Daniel would point at objects, book, chair, window, and she would repeat them slowly. Sometimes she laughed when she made mistakes. Sometimes she frowned in frustration. But always she kept trying. One night, she pointed at a picture of Daniel's parents on the wall. "Mother, father," he explained. Her eyes lingered on the photo for a long time. Her voice was soft when she whispered, "Gone." Daniel knew she was speaking of her own family. He reached out and placed his hand on hers. She looked at him with tears in her eyes, and for the first time, she leaned against his shoulder, seeking comfort. But even as this new warmth grew, the shadow of danger never left. Daniel checked the windows every night. He saw the strange car again once, far away on the road, its dark windows reflecting the setting sun. He knew they were still searching. Leora seemed to feel it too. Sometimes she would stop what she was doing and look toward the door, her eyes sharp, her body tense. "Hunters," she would whisper. Daniel hated the fear in her voice. And yet he also saw her strength. She had suffered so much, but she was still standing, still fighting to live. One afternoon, Daniel found her sitting outside, staring at the sky. The blue stretched endlessly above them. She pointed upward, her voice filled with longing. "Home," she said. Daniel sat beside her. "Do you miss it?" he asked. She nodded slowly, but then she turned to him and said, "Here." Also home. The words struck him hard. She had lost everything. Yet she was choosing to make this place her home, with him. It was then Daniel realized he was no longer just protecting her out of duty or pity. He cared for her, truly. Her presence gave him purpose, something he had not felt in years. His lonely house was no longer empty. His meals no longer silent. His days no longer gray. But danger was closing in. That evening, while Daniel chopped wood again, he noticed footprints near the edge of his property. Not his, not hers. Someone had been close, watching. He followed the tracks until they vanished into the trees. His stomach twisted. The hunters were drawing closer when he returned to the house. Leora was waiting by the door, her eyes wide. She seemed to know without him saying, "They come," she whispered. Daniel nodded. His fear was real. But so was his resolve. He could not abandon her. Not now, not ever, that night. As they sat together by the fire, Daniel looked at her and said softly, "Whatever happens, we face it together." Leora blinked, then smiled faintly. "Family," she said, pressing her hand to her chest. Daniel's throat tightened, and he nodded. The bond between them was no longer fragile. It was strong, built not only from survival, but from trust, laughter, and small, shared moments. They were no longer two strangers from different worlds. They were a family, and family was worth fighting for. The night was darker than usual. Clouds covered the moon, and the air was heavy with silence. Daniel sat by the window, his rifle resting against the wall. He could not sleep. Not when he knew the hunters were close. Every instinct in his body told him danger was near. Leora lay on the couch, her eyes closed. But she was not truly sleeping. Her breathing was shallow. Her hands clenched the blanket. She felt it too. The same quiet before the storm, around midnight. Daniel heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel. His chest tightened. A black vehicle rolled to a stop near the house. The headlights cut through the night like knives. He grabbed the rifle, his hands shaking. "Leora," he whispered. She sat up instantly. Fear already in her eyes, voices came from outside, sharp, commanding. The sound of boots on the dirt made Daniel's blood run cold. Then came the knock. Hard and merciless, not like the weak knock of the night she had first arrived, but strong, like fists demanding entry. "Open up," a voice shouted. Government inspection. Daniel froze. His mind raced. If he opened, they would see her. If he refused, they would break in. Either way, the danger had arrived. Leora stood trembling, her eyes wide. Daniel pointed quickly to the cellar. "Hide," he hissed. She shook her head. "They know," she whispered. Her voice was full of despair. But Daniel grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the hidden door anyway. He shoved the shelves aside and pushed her inside the dark space. Her eyes locked on his, fear and trust mixed together. "Family," she whispered before disappearing into the shadows. The front door cracked as boots slammed against it. Daniel barely had time to move before it burst open. 3 men stormed inside, dressed in black. Their faces cold and expressionless. One held a strange, scanning device. Its screen glowing red. It beeped as it passed over the room. Daniel forced his voice steady. "What do you want?" The leader stepped forward, his eyes sharp. "We're tracking a fugitive," he said. "An alien, dangerous." His gaze swept over the room like a knife. Daniel kept his face calm, but his heart thundered. The scanner beeped louder near the cellar. One of the men turned toward it. "There," he said. Daniel moved quickly, stepping in front of them. "This is my home," he said firmly. "There's nothing here." The man shoved him aside roughly. Daniel stumbled, but grabbed the rifle. The leader sneered. "Step away, human. This isn't your fight." But Daniel raised the rifle. His hands steady now. "It is," he said. His voice carried fire before the man could react. The cellar door burst open. Leora leaped out, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. For the first time, Daniel saw her true strength. Her body moved with speed and grace. She struck one of the men, sending him crashing into the wall. Ah! His weapon clattered to the floor. The others shouted, aiming their guns. Daniel fired. The sound exploding through the house. One hunter fell, clutching his shoulder. Smoke filled the air. Chaos erupted. Leora moved like lightning, her hands glowing with strange energy. She struck another man, his body flying backward. But there were 2. Many more boots stormed in from outside. Daniel and Leora fought side by side, but the hunters pressed harder. A stun weapon crackled, hitting Leora in the back. She cried out, her body falling to the floor. Daniel shouted her name, rage flooding him. He swung the rifle like a club, knocking another man down. 2 hunters grabbed Leora, dragging her toward the door. "No!" Daniel roared. He lunged forward, tackling one of them. The struggle was brutal, fists and boots striking in the dark. Pain shot through his ribs, but he refused to let go. Leora's hand reached toward him, her eyes desperate. "Daniel," she gasped. Her voice was weak, but her eyes burned with fire. He grabbed her hand, pulling with all his strength. Together they toppled the hunter, holding her. Energy flared again, blasting the man backward. Sirens wailed in the distance. More vehicles were coming. Daniel knew they could not stay. "Not another second. We have to run," he shouted. Leora stumbled to her feet, her body shaking from the stun. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her toward the back door. They burst into the night, the cold air slapping against their skin. Behind them, shouts and gunfire filled the house. Bullets tore through the walls, splinters flying. Daniel dragged Leora into the trees, their steps uneven, their breaths ragged. The forest swallowed them in darkness. Branches whipped against their faces. The sound of pursuit grew louder. Flashlights cut through the night. "This way," Daniel whispered. guiding her through the thick brush. His heart pounded, every step a battle. At last, they collapsed in a small clearing, hidden by thick trees. Both gasped for breath. Daniel looked at her, her face pale but determined. She was alive. They were both alive. Her hand touched his cheek softly. "You fight. For me," she whispered. Daniel nodded, his chest heaving. "I told you, family." She smiled faintly, her eyes shining even in the dark. But the danger was not over. The hunters were still out there. And now they knew Daniel and Leora were no longer hidden. They were fugitives, running for their lives. And yet, as Daniel looked at her, his fear turned to steel. They had faced capture and survived. Together, they would keep fighting. The forest was silent, except for the sound of their heavy breathing. Daniel leaned against a tree, holding Leora close. Her body still shook from the stun weapon, but her eyes burned with determination. She would not give up, not now, not after everything behind them. The hunters' voices echoed faintly, the crack of branches breaking under boots. The search continued. Daniel tightened his grip on her hand. "We can't stop," he whispered. Leora nodded weakly. "Go," she said. Through the night, they moved, slipping deeper into the woods. The trees became thicker, the air colder. Daniel's muscles screamed with exhaustion. But he refused to stop. He had one purpose now: to keep her safe. Hours passed, the shouts faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of crickets and the rustling of leaves when dawn finally broke. Painting the sky with pale light, Daniel and Leora found themselves near an abandoned cabin deep in the forest. Its roof sagged, its windows broken, but it was shelter. Inside, dust covered every surface. Daniel guided Leora to a chair. She sank down, her face pale. Daniel searched the cabin quickly, finding old blankets. He wrapped her carefully. She looked up at him, her lips trembling into a faint smile. "Safe," she whispered, for the first time since the attack. Daniel allowed himself a breath of relief, but deep inside, he knew it was not over. The hunters would return. They always did. The next few days were a blur. Daniel fixed the cabin as best he could. Sealing holes, cleaning the space, he hunted small animals for food, gathered water from a nearby stream. Leora helped when she could. Her strength returned slowly. Her spirit, however, grew stronger each day. One afternoon, as they sat outside, sunlight filtering through the trees, Leora picked a small wildflower. She held it gently, then placed it in Daniel's hand. "Family," she said. Her voice carried warmth. Daniel felt something stirred deep in his chest, a feeling stronger than fear, stronger than loneliness. At night, when the fire crackled softly, Leora shared more of her story. She spoke of her people, of how they lived in harmony with nature, of songs that carried through the stars. Her voice was sad, but also proud. Daniel listened in silence, realizing how much she had lost, and how much she still carried inside her. One night, when the wind howled outside, Leora turned to him and said softly, "You saved me. I give life back." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" She pressed her hand against his chest. "You empty? Alone?" Her dark eyes held his. "Now?" "Not alone." Daniel could not speak for a moment. She was right. Before her, his life had been nothing but silence and empty rooms. Now every day had meaning. Every word, every smile. She had given him life as much as he had given her. But peace was fragile. A week after they found the cabin, Daniel spotted smoke on the horizon. Too far to be a wildfire, too dark to be a simple campfire. He knew what it meant. The hunters were searching again, sweeping the forest. Leora saw the fear in his eyes. "They come," she whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes, his grip tightened on her hand. "But this time, we'll be ready, together." They prepared. Daniel built traps around the cabin, Simple but effective, Leora used her strange energy. Weaving it into the soil and stones, the forest itself seemed to bend to her will. Stronger, sharper, she was no longer the weak, starving woman who had collapsed on his porch. She was becoming something more. When the hunters finally came, they did not find easy prey. They stepped into a forest alive with resistance. Traps snapped, branches fell, shadows moved. Daniel and Leora fought side by side, their bond making them stronger than fear. The battle was fierce, but in the end, the hunters retreated, limping. And broken, the forest was quiet once more. Daniel and Leora stood together in the clearing, their breaths heavy, their hands clasped. They had survived again. As night fell, Leora leaned against him, her voice soft but clear. No more running. Daniel looked at her. What do you mean? She smiled faintly. Here. New life, she gestured to the forest, to the cabin. Home. Daniel felt the weight of her words. He realized she was right. They could not keep fleeing forever, but they could build something here. Away from the world, hidden, safe, together. They could create a life. The stars shone bright above them. Leora lifted her face to the sky. Her eyes reflected the starlight. My people gone, she whispered. But not all lost. She turned to him. Her voice steady. I have you. Daniel wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. His heart felt full in a way he had never known. You're my family now, he said. Her smile widened. Tears glistening on her cheeks. Forever, she whispered. And so. Deep in the forest, in a broken cabin reborn with warmth, a new family began. A human man and an alien woman, bound not by blood, but by choice, by courage, by love. They had faced hunger, fear, and capture. But they had found something stronger. They had found each other,